Tonight's story is somewhat unique and calls for a different kind of introduction.
Who's going on? Today we are canceling the apocalypse!
Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet.
And this is?
Lilu Dallas Multipass.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Houston, we have a problem.
Have you tried turning it off and on again?
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Now, where was I?
Welcome to episode 123 of the BlokeBusters podcast. I'm Paul, and today I am joined by Janelle and Meghan, and that's not Janelle Meghan, that is Janelle and Meghan. And I know that this could get very, very interesting very quickly, from the wonderful Cause and Creation podcast, and you should go and subscribe to that right now. Regular listeners will remember Janelle from several episodes, including the Strangest Things episodes that we have that we really need to do again since season 3 aired. How long ago was it now?
Very long time ago, but it's okay.
Yeah. Yes, when season 4 comes out, maybe we'll do another big review of both of them. But yes, thank you guys for coming on. This should be very interesting. Is there anything you want people to know about you before we get going?
I mean, it's awesome to be back. Thank you so much for having me back. And
oh, no problem.
I feel like just as a prerequisite for just myself, I always like to say I don't always like the movies everybody else likes. So I'm always going to be, I feel like, kind of like the black sheep in a lot of these conversations. So that's my kind of warning to the audience that I'm not always a fan of the things everyone else likes. So, and it's not even in a way where I like the really unique indie stuff. It's more I just have a really particular taste. So.
Okay. Maybe that will come into play a bit later then.
That's what I'm warning everyone.
And Meghan, do you have any warnings you want to give up front?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna be honest. I am one of those people who has a lot of soapboxes and wants to tear the world down, but what we're talking about today is actually my favorite movie, so I'm gonna fight everybody on it.
Interesting. Okay. Well, yes, for those of you that are unable to read the title of this episode, we will be talking about the film Heathers. Now, full disclosure, I had never seen this film until about 5 days ago.
You'd never seen it either?
Not only had I never seen it, I've never even seen a trailer for this film before I hit play on it for the first time.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I knew nothing about this going in. I didn't even know who was in it.
I call this my sick day movie. This is my comfort food movie. I found this movie when I was really, really young. Me and my little sister used to watch it all the time, and this is anytime there was a snow day at school or as a grown-up, I was homesick from work, this is the movie that I watch.
Interesting. Okay.
I had heard about the movie.
It's a weird favorite movie, but
I had heard about the movie, but I never watched it. And I feel like my expectations, I think it's actually really nice that you went in with no expectations, because I think my expectations kind of ruined my experience a little bit.
Well, I guess obviously we just covered everyone's first previous thoughts on the film, so yeah. Okay, so for people that don't know, which I feel like most people listening to this will know a bit more about it than I did going in. This film was directed by Michael Lemmon. It had a $3 million budget, and it made $1,108,462 US and had no international release. This was only domestic when it first came out. So, yeah, this thing bombed.
Okay, I'm gonna be honest. It bombed hard when it came out, but I think that that's part of why it was so good, in a way.
Yeah, I mean, this film, based on everything I have since found out about it, yes, this is definitely a cult film. Yeah, it appears to have a very, very big following of people that didn't watch it when it first came out. So take that however you want to take that.
They just weren't ready for it. It was ahead of its time.
Oh, yes, yes.
Or at least that's what I say.
And probably what several people in this film would also say about it. Yes, so I guess first question I had to ask, as someone that never went through an American high school, did this film play up the stereotypes of what you actually find in an American high school well, or is it a complete caricature? Because I don't know enough to know how close to the mark some of it is or isn't.
Janelle, do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
I'll go first. I mean, for me, it was really accurate, to be honest, because I grew up in a very similar town that I feel like is this like kind of small like suburban area where like most of the cliches were true, where it's like the cheerleaders and like the football players were kind of like worshipped. And even, like, the friend dynamics a little bit, of, like, these, like, social hierarchies. And, like, I think I wasn't as aware of them in high school, but looking back on it, I can definitely say that they were happening. I think it's a very interesting thing, I think. When you're in high school, I don't think you're as aware of those dynamics and how extreme they are until you look back on it, at least for me. So, yes, for sure, but I didn't realize it at the time.
See, And I think it's part of, like, what I have related to. Because, I mean, I watched this movie for the first time when I was in, like, late middle school, early high school. And have just, like, watched it again and again and again since then. Like, I think it's definitely a dramatization. Like, no, we weren't murdering people and faking suicides and stuff like that. And, high school. But I think as far as, like, the cliques and the friend groups and just the idea of, like, whenever you're a teenager, everything feels like the end of the world. And it does feel like, the adults just don't understand. And all of that, I think, was extremely accurate. And something that I think this film nailed that everything that came after it didn't. Because, like, this was one of the first movies that did the whole, like... Oh, I'm trying to remember, like, the technical term for it is. But it's, like, basically, it's, like, there's a lot of teen movies that do the whole, like, lunchroom. Now we're going to show you every single clique in the school. And this was the first one that was subtle enough to be the most accurate. Like, it didn't just show, like, oh, that's where the nerds sit, and that's where the jocks sit, and that's where the cheerleaders sit. It was like, oh, and then here we have the stoners, and here we have this group, and here we have this group. Like, I think that it was scary accurate, for sure. Okay, yeah, so it wasn't an overt exposition dump at the beginning of the film. Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I've been trying to think on this film because it definitely has its own style in terms of, like, choices it made and things like that. And I was looking into it, and the guy that wrote this originally wanted Stanley Kubrick to direct it, because he was so... That would have been amazing.
He was so inspired by Kubrick's Doctor Strangelove. So, like, that... And when you actually know that, like, I think that shows you several, like, little things in the film that's like, oh, yeah, they're definitely pulling inspiration from that. And I was trying to think of, outside of that, what film does this film feel like to me? Because it's definitely something that has a very odd tone. I've not quite seen a film like it before with some of the things that they do, and it kind of came to me earlier today. This film feels like if the makers of Airplane had done something in the world of Donnie Darko.
That's such a good way to phrase it, honestly. That's so good. Well, and I think I think one of the important things to remember about it is that this film was sort of the first of its kind. Like, this was the first film that was providing a subversion of the John Hughes movies, like Pretty in Pink, The Breakfast Club, stuff like that. So my big thing in defense of it is, like, no, it's not perfect, but it was something completely new that a lot of other people have borrowed from. And I think, like, honestly, probably a lot of inspiration from that.
Yeah. I would admit so.
I feel like it unfairly gets compared to Mean Girls. And I think that, like, almost... Like, I don't think it's anything like that, but, like, if you talk to someone about Mean Girls, Heathers usually gets brought up, or Heathers gets brought up with Mean Girls. Like, they always are paired, just because it's, like, the trio and, like, kind of that female dynamic of, like, being, you know, fighting for power. And
well, they were brothers.
What do you mean?
Did you know that? They were the guy who made Mean Girls. I mean, like, yes, Tina Fey, but the guy who worked on Mean Girls was the brother of the guy who did the Heathers. Yeah.
Okay.
Like, the Mean... Like, that's why, like, Mean Girls was... Everybody calls, like, Mean Girls the Heathers without all the murder. Because it was, like, the same family.
That's why I didn't like it, though. Because I didn't think it was anything like Mean Girls. And I feel like if I would have went into it thinking it was more, you know, like a Donnie Darko type thing, I think I would have enjoyed it more. Like, I think it gets compared to the wrong things is kind of what I'm saying.
No, I think that that's totally fair. Well, and I think that a big problem is that it gets compared to all the teeny bopper movies that came after it when it really was kind of its own category.
Oh, definitely. But I also will say is me and Megan, we just on our podcast, we just talked about this movie, Jennifer's Body. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I know of the film, but I have not watched it myself.
Oh, you should watch it.
Definitely.
It's actually a really phenomenal film.
It's really good, and I think it's similar to this. Like, that's what I would say is similar, because the dialogue is very similar, and it's dark. It has a lot of dark themes that I think it plays with a lot of dark themes with teenagers that I don't think a lot of movies are willing to always go there.
Right, yeah, and yeah, a lot of films really do shy away from going all in on that sort of stuff, and obviously this film, it's enough of a satire / parody that they're able to use the really morbid subject matter to just play on that and to make you laugh at things you wouldn't normally. However, you did touch on something I wanted to ask you guys about, which is the dialogue. Do you guys have any favourite lines of dialogue in this film? Because I wrote several down.
I mean, are we allowed to cuss?
Absolutely, you may fire away when ready.
So, my two favorite lines from this film were always "Shut up, Heather," because my little sister's name was Heather.
Oh, there you go.
And also, "Fuck me gently with a chainsaw." I got sent home early from school one day for saying that in middle school because this was my favorite movie.
That's one of my favorites, definitely. But one of the lines that literally made me laugh out loud because it was so unexpected is when Heather says to Veronica, like, they're in a fight, and she's like, "You were a Girl Scout cookie." It just made me die laughing. I don't know why. I think just because of the context of, like, being in a fight with someone and literally calling them a Girl Scout cookie. It was amazing.
Well, and literally, I mean, it's such a quotable movie. I mean, like, I can literally, like I said, I've watched it a lot. So, I mean, I can quote the whole thing. But, I mean, also just, like, "Our love is God, let's go get a slushie." Like, it's just, there's so many. "Chaos is what killed the dinosaurs, darling." Like, there's so many quotes. Mm-hmm. Like, this movie was made for t-shirts.
Yeah, and some of the lines that really just came out of left field were the ones that was like, okay, I sort of appreciate that. Such as, Veronica's dad just asks, so what was the first day after Heather's suicide like?
Yep.
Okay. Like, yeah, we're going there. Okay, I like that. And probably my...
Well, and like Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, my favorite, I have a sort of joint thing for my favorite line just because of how much fun, you know, the writers were having just writing the script, which is the bit where the dad breaks down and just says, like, yeah, I love my dead gay son at the funeral.
Yes.
But then...
I don't know if you're familiar with the musical, but they made a whole song out of that line.
I'm not surprised. And then the other one is, like, as they go back to the school, and the one character whose name is escaping me right now, but where, like, they're trying to lead everyone in a prayer / hug / holding hands, big scene that's going on, and, like, it's just ramping up, and then she just all of a sudden just throws out, "Look, here comes the TV crew."
Yep.
It's like, oh, okay.
Yep.
Like all of these lines that aren't necessarily the ones that everyone is just quoting. Obviously, all the ones you threw out, they were good lines, but it's like the ones that really got me in this film were the ones that were just like, you know, the writer just threw that in there, just chuckling to himself, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, one of my other favorites is, like, Miss Pauline is, like, the kind of, like, hippy dippy teacher, and whenever she's, like, after Handler Chandler's quote unquote suicide, she's like, "Oh, we just need to get everybody together to talk and feel," and the principal is like, "Yeah, call me when the shuttle lands." Like.
And yeah, one of, like, having actually worked in a school, because I've my day job was working one-on-one doing direct intervention with children and adolescents with developmental disabilities, and I was doing it in school settings. I was doing it in stuff, and working in the schools. That scene where all the teachers are talking is like, well, you know, how much time can we really take off? Like, it's, you know, we got the suicide, so like half a day. Like, I don't, like, that's somewhat accurate, actually. Like, it's not.
No, like, they're literally talking about their, like, oh, because, like, there's, like, that whole moment where they're like, which Heather was it? And they were like, was it the cheerleader? And they're like, no. And he's like, oh, man, I would go half a day for a cheerleader,
Yeah.
but this one wasn't the cheerleader.
Yeah, and it like, those things, I have a really dark sense of humor, so I definitely enjoy films like this where, like, the subject matter is just dark and they're just having fun with it. So yeah, I enjoy that side of the film. So I guess this could be interesting. Which character is your guys' favorite?
I mean, mine is definitely Veronica. Like, I feel like Veronica is the first character, like, that I saw that I really related to.
Okay.
I loved her, and then I'm also just gonna go ahead and throw out that, like, JD is completely, like, guys in a trench coat is my type.
I see. So you were seeing yourself on screen there, kind of.
100%.
Okay.
So, I don't want to say I didn't like any of the characters, but I didn't. That was one of my big problems with the movie, is I couldn't feel like I could root for any of them, really. Like, I had different reasons to not root for all of them. I think my favorite, personally, probably would be, I don't know their, like, last names, but the Heather that, tries to kill herself with the pills. I think, and, like, when her moment where she, like, calls in to the radio station and, like, has that really vulnerable moment, like, I think she became my favorite in that moment. And then, like, how she kind of ends up being the most vulnerable and the most, like, down to earth out of them all, and who's, like, kind of, to me, the most realistic. So she was kind of my favorite.
I will say, watching that part, and especially when she ends up trying to kill herself with the pills, that I got the feeling that maybe the people that made Saved by the Bell watched this film, because I was getting very Jessie vibes from her. Like, specifically the episode where she has those caffeine pills because they're not allowed to say speed on TV back then.
Oh yeah, no, they did that on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air too.
That's so funny.
Carlton took caffeine pills, quote unquote.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a weird era of television. But anyway.
Personally, I'm just glad that Adderall isn't a new thing when I was in college, so. I never did. But I just, like, I know a lot of people that did. I just want to say that for, like, my own cover-up. But
For any potential employers listening, I never did. Yeah, I genuinely was incredibly, like, what you would call straight-laced just growing up. Like, I've never actually done any form of recreational drug whatsoever.
no, I was the mom friend for all of my more dangerous friends, so I get ya.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When I was at university, I was also working at Domino's Pizza, and I would be closing, so I would often be getting back to my house at about like midnight or so, and then every now and again I couldn't be bothered to dig into my bag to get my keys, so I would just sort of knock on the window at the house, because the way the house was set up, you had the front door and then you just go over a little bit and the living room window is right there. So one day I knocked on that because the light was on, and I was waiting outside for maybe 2 minutes and no one bothered to come, so I finally dug my keys out and walked inside, and the next morning my housemates informed me that the reason they hadn't opened the door was that they had been imbibing in some marijuana, and they were convinced that I was the police.
Of course.
And
you're always convinced it's the police.
and I was saying, like, they were convinced as well that I didn't know that they'd been doing that, and I had to inform them that I'd walked into a house where they'd been smoking marijuana, so it wasn't exactly subtle. But yeah, I ended up just going upstairs and going to bed, and they ended up watching TV later afterwards. After they got themselves off the floor.
They have a very different story of that night than you do, so that's the story of how they almost got busted.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Yeah, I enjoyed hearing their side of it when they eventually told me. Well, I was saying with favourite characters in this film, like, obviously, for me, I would say that JD is probably my favourite character to watch in the film, just because of just how ridiculously insane he gets as it just goes on, and he just becomes this just rambling lunatic, basically, by the end of the film. And then, and spoilers for anyone that hasn't seen this, his death scene I loved because of that little thing where it doesn't go off, so he had to fiddle with it a little bit.
Exactly. No, that's like one of the best moments of the whole film, is he's trying to have this dramatic suicide, like, blow himself up, and it doesn't even go off the first time.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. However, I think my favourite caricature in the film is probably the police, because those two police characters are, like, so obviously taking the piss out of just every stereotypical police thing out there, good and bad. Like, it's like they're just so stupid. And it was just kind of a relief just to have these characters. You're like, oh, you're not even trying to be real. Like, in this film, which is so just, just over the top in some ways, but also, like, trying to get a point across and stuff. Like, you've just got these characters, so it's just like, no, they're stupid. Here you go. Have fun.
Yeah. No, like, I mean, like, on, like, the least subtle note, like, they find Veronica and JD pretending to, like, make out naked in the car like they were hooking up, and they're like, and the guy's like, oh, it's just two two teenagers making out, and the other one's like, oh, are they naked? And then, like, on, like, the least subtle note, like, they literally pick up the gun with a stick, like, super, like, protocol, and then he just, like, puts it in his hand, and, like, immediately, like, messes up any kind of fingerprints that there could have been. Like, they're just the worst.
I didn't even notice that. That's great.
Yeah, it was kind of refreshing just to have that much of a we don't give a shit
Just the most incompetent cops you could ask for.
Yeah,
They're both named Dewey, and their dads were both on the force, and that's how they got the job.
absolutely. I also, one aspect of the film that really kind of threw me a little bit was Martha, because she obviously starts out as this character that is the center of ridicule for many people, but she's probably the character that, like, at the end is obviously just the most normal, down-to-earth, and just kind of chill, like, a nice character out of the entire film. Like, she's just, like, and at the end with Veronica just being like, you know, hey, do you want to just hang out on prom night? And it's just, yeah, sure. And it's just like a nice ending to, like, I didn't see that coming. Like, I genuinely expected her to be another punchline, and she really wasn't. Like, I was thrown by that.
Well, it's something that the musical did that I think was better than the film. Because there was a musical version that came out later, and I feel like the film was very progressive, but it was still a product of the time. And one of the things that I thought was really brilliant was in the musical, they actually kind of fused together her old best friend before she joined the Heathers clique and the girl who tries to commit suicide and fails, the girl who, like, walks out into traffic, that gets made fun of for just trying to emulate the popular kids for trying to commit suicide. They made them one character, and it really is just kind of like, she is one of the most sympathetic characters just because she's the real victim through the whole thing. Like, she's the one who's alone, and the one who lost her friend, and the one who's hurting, and the one who is suffering, and the one who doesn't get any sympathy from any other characters in the movie until the very end.
Yeah, yeah, because it was interesting, because I was trying to think about it, because as we see, Veronica has become part of the Heathers clique, which, if you really think about it, makes no sense, because much like the Ashleys in Recess, you know for a fact they never would have let her in. Like,
exactly. Exactly.
But anyway, yeah, like she does just, Veronica wants to kind of get out of it and go back to her nerdy friends or her old friend, and become disillusioned with this whole thing. But do you ever actually see anyone that she was really... I think there's that one person in the cafeteria, but yeah, she just kind of talks to her for 10 seconds, and then that's it. You never see the character again. Like, it's just it was a little odd thinking about it now, that she had the old friend that you see in that scene, and then she just ends up talking to Martha at the end. So yeah, I didn't think about it.
One of my favorite scenes, though, is the scene with Veronica and that other girl that she used to be friends with. I don't remember her name. And they're talking, and one of the things the girl says is, like, you know, I'm kind of basically like she's so jealous of Veronica and her life. And Veronica says something like, you know, your dreams are better than my reality, or something like that. And it really is such a really great moment, I think, and realization, I think, for both of them, that, like, it's like always, like, the grass is always greener, you know? And I think it's a really simple way of Veronica being like, I'm kind of jealous of the fact that you're just a teenager and you haven't kissed anyone yet, and you don't have all of these complicated things that I have, that I'm dealing with. And then, you know, the other one who's, you know, not sexually active and things like that is like, oh, I wish I was doing all of these exciting things and going to all these parties. It's like, you know, it's that struggle of, like, do I grow up too fast, or do I, you know, am I acting too young? And it's a really real balance that I feel like a lot of teenagers, and especially female teenagers, go through.
No, I always thought that that was really, really great. And I also... So, like, this movie wasn't about female friendships, and it was... It had two women who were the producers for it, but for the most part, like, writer-director were male. So I think that, like, any female interaction moments you got were gonna be subtle. And the one thing that I will say, too, is that this might just be because I've watched it so many times, and I will completely say, like, I am biased for that. But there is a picture of Veronica and Heather Chandler, the first Heather, the really, really bitchy leader one that dies first. There's a picture of them in, like, a photo booth in their locker that just looks very like average teenage girls messing around. And I do think that there was a level of Veronica and Heather were actually friends in, like, their weird, like, frenemy kind of way. And I think that that's even kind of reflected in a weird way of, like, you know, I mean, like, if we're assuming that Veronica and Heather Chandler are best friends, then it's almost more upsetting that Heather Chandler dies and nobody's really checking in to see how Veronica or the other Heathers are handling it. Like, they do kind of just straight move on to, like, oh, like, how was it? Or the line that you were talking about. How was, like, the day after Heather committed suicide? Like, nobody really gets the chance to, like, grieve that. And I'll even say, too, like, one of the things that I thought was really brilliant about the movie is the lighting design in it, and the color design is incredible. And there's this really, really great moment whenever they go to the college party. It's, Veronica and Heather Chandler, the first Heather that dies, the leader one. And it's, like, very well established, like, Veronica's color is blue, and Heather Chandler is red, and McNamara is yellow, and the Shannon Doherty Heather is green. And so they go to the party, and they're wearing their colors, and whenever it's that situation where the college guys are trying to hook up with them, and they're both, like, feeling kind of pressured into doing something that they don't want to do, one of them goes through with it, one of them doesn't. There's this really, really great mirror scene that both of them have, and Heather's looking into a mirror in a blue room, and Veronica's looking into a mirror in a red room, where they've kind of, like, sort of been in each other's worlds and are, like, struggling with it. Maybe I'm getting too heady about it. Like I said, I've seen it a lot, but I even think that, like, there was friendship between, like, Veronica and the Heathers. It was, well, and I think it's a very touching moment, too, with, like, Veronica and Heather McNamara whenever she's, like, guzzling all the pills and she's, like, stopping her from committing suicide. Like, there's, like, this really tender moment where she's telling her, like, nobody's happy every day of their life. If you were, you'd be a game show host. And she's, like, talking her off a cliff, basically. Like, I think that there are, like, really strong female relationships in it. They're just very subtle. Like, you have to kind of, like, you can't blink or you'll miss them.
Yeah, and one thing you actually said about as well, like, how it seems like everyone just kind of moves on really quickly from the suicide there as well. I think that felt to me like a whole thing of everything's so superficial that everyone just gets back into their own routine. For instance, you probably noticed, having watched the film so much, whenever you see Veronica sitting down outside at the table with her parents, it is the same dialogue. They're eating the same thing. The same things happen, and then she leaves. That, like, she was rushing home to have dinner with her parents, and all she does is sit down, eat a little bit of pate, and leave. Like, it's just...
yeah, no, it's like literally tragedy happens, and everything stays exactly the same.
Yeah, everyone just wants to get back into the routine again. And I think it really did feel like the whole thing was like, oh, the popular person died. Well, it's okay because there's more popular people, so we're good. Like, how much does anyone actually care?
Well, and I think that that's something that the movie really accomplishes that a lot of movies don't, is, like, it really does hit. I mean, like, this movie hits on suicide and murder and date rape and like all of these really intense subjects, but it's like it hits it and it makes a punchline and it moves on. And I think that gets a stronger reaction out of people in a way, just because it's like it's not beating you over the head and it's not preaching to you. It's like it sort of makes you outraged that everybody's reacting the way that they are. Like, watching it, you're like, why aren't you guys handling this better? When, like, I feel like in real life, like, we have a tendency to kind of, you know, we're living our lives and then something unfortunately exciting happens like that, and then we just want things to go back to normal. And I think like this movie does a really, really good job of like, instead of like beating you over the head with this is bad, you shouldn't feel that way, it just kind of like holds a mirror up so you can see like, wow, this is awful, we shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're saying that that was like an intentional thing of like, you know, they're dealing like it's like it hits you over the head with something and then it moves on very quickly, because I feel like that's one of the reasons why it rubbed me the wrong way a lot, because I feel like it didn't stay in those spaces long enough to like fully experience them. But I do totally see the argument that that was intentional, and that's like kind of the point, is that we don't process grief and we don't process things the way that we should, and we don't feel emotions as deeply as we need to. And maybe that was like the whole, you know, the whole reasoning behind, you know, showing a really dramatic scene and then moving on to the next dramatic thing, and you're still just kind of just like, oh my god, like that just happened, like we're not even going to process that, now we're on to this next horrific thing. Because that was very overwhelming for me personally, but I do understand how that could have been intentional too.
Well, there's like literally a whole dream sequence where like it's like they don't actually end up killing Shannon Doherty's character, but like Veronica has like this dream sequence that JD does like kill her and fakes her suicide, and then it's like this whole funeral scene where she ends up there with the ghost of Heather Chandler, and the first thing that Heather Chandler says is she was like, oh, I had at least 70 like more people at my funeral. Like, it's just, it's so callous that it kind of like really like hits you. Like, it makes an impact because it's so callous.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm interested to hear this one. I don't know if you guys have seen it. Have either of you watched World's Greatest Dad?
Yes. I wasn't going to bring it up because that's a really weird movie, but it's very in line with that.
Yeah, because good. Janelle, you were saying that you didn't quite like
Janelle, you should never watch that movie. I can't even stomach to watch it a second time. But
oh wow, okay, then I'm good.
Yeah, because it was one of the last films that Robin Williams did before he died, and like you were saying that you didn't quite like how they didn't stay in those moments and really deal with the emotions and stuff from something like that. And World's Greatest Dad is, it sounds like you don't really know much about it. It's a film where Robin Williams plays a father who's a teacher at the school, and his son ends up dying in an autoerotic asphyxiation accident, and his writing, as in Robin Williams' character's writing, is then seen as his son's writing, and then it takes off. And so like he's kind of riding the coattails of his son's death, celebrating his writing, and like, and everyone at school's being super nice to him now and all of that, and like it's just trying to see him deal with what's going on, and it crescendos very well. However, as Megan said, it's an interesting film and difficult to watch.
No, it's an amazing. Like, I would never watch it a second time because it's a very disturbing film. But it's like the ending monologue is like very brilliantly written, because it's literally like Robin Williams finally fessing up and being like, look, my son was an asshole and I didn't even like him. You guys didn't like him and everything. And like literally the only reason that people are like bandying behind him, and like the reason that Robin Williams is like, he's like on like talk shows and stuff, is because his son died in this really horrible way, and he like made it look like this very heroic suicide type thing. And it like honestly, like whoever, I don't know like who the production team was behind that, but it had to be inspired by the Heathers, I would have to say.
Yeah. I mean, I can, like, having now seen this, I can see that maybe that could be the germ of the idea, and then they really took it and made a very good film out of it that you definitely don't want to rewatch. Yeah, it was. I mean, that was an interesting film because like you had I cannot remember his name for the life of me, but the kid who plays Junie from Spy Kids is the son in the film. Yep. The Rock is one of the teachers, and it's just like it's so odd, like watching the film. Like you're kind of on a knife's edge throughout the entire film, and Robin Williams did such a good job in that. But yeah, if you do end up deciding to watch it, Janelle, plan to have the rest of the day off probably, because you're going to be dealing with some stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, I tend to just avoid those movies. I mean, we were just talking about before we jumped on recording this. I won't even watch. What's the movie that
Inside
you're
Out?
Inside Out.
I
was going to make that
Out.
joke. If you won't watch Inside Out, you will not be able to get through World's Greatest Dad.
Yeah,
like
so...
it's one of those movies where like I'm glad I've seen it once, but I will never watch it again. Like it's not a feel good movie.
No, absolutely not.
It's brilliant acting, and it's a brilliant script, but it's very emotional.
Yes, yeah, it definitely would do that. And I watched that film before I was a dad. I don't think I could watch it now. I really don't.
I can't even imagine. I watched it when I was in college. I was just like binging a bunch of movies, like after Robin Williams passed away.
Yeah.
And I was just like watching a bunch of his movies, and I saw that one pop up on Netflix, and I'm like, oh, I haven't seen this one. This will be a good like mood booster. World's Greatest Dad. And it was like a car wreck. Like I couldn't stop, but I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to watch this anymore. Like it's a lot. It's a ride.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting. Obviously, we're really tangenting now, but some of the last things that Robin Williams made before he died, you have World's Greatest Dad, that was a couple of years, I think, before he died, and then also he made, what was it? It's like, I think it's just called Angry Man or something like that, and it's like it's a film where he's someone who just gets so angry, and he's told by his doctor that he had 90 minutes to live, and so like he goes around and he's just kind of acting insane around New York City, I think it is. And it's just like all of these really interesting choices that he made back then with some of the stuff, and it's like, oh, he actually dealt with death a lot in the last few things that he ended up doing. It was very strange. Unfortunately, that was the stuff he did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell you what, let's bring it back to Heathers. Right at the end.
Well, what did you think of the Heathers? I mean, like, as just somebody who just went in without thinking about it at all.
I'd say, as someone that went into this film not knowing anything about it, I enjoyed the style of it. I'm definitely the right type of person to enjoy this film. Like, you know, the complete irreverence that it has for everything and everyone, the dark humor that's in it, and just some of the random throwaway lines. Like I had a couple of notes that I didn't even know how to get to, but I'll just kind of mention them here. It's like random things that I just quite liked, like how after the party when she's writing in her diary, she has a monocle on. For no reason. She just had the monocle.
Well, she's just that much.
And then also, one of the things I really liked is just how, like, whenever she's writing in her diary, like, it's as if you've just handed someone a pen and just said, pretend you're writing, But it's someone that has never done acting in front of a camera before, so they're just like, okay, big letters, here we go. It's like, her writing is just insane throughout it, and I really like that. And the only two things that I wrote down that I was like, really? Oh, okay. The first thing I have to ask, because I genuinely don't know, is cow tipping a real thing? Is this a thing that people do?
Oh, man. I mean, I don't know about Pennsylvania, Janelle, but in West Virginia, cow tipping is a thing.
I did not know if it was a thing or not, to be honest.
Cow tipping is unfortunately a thing.
Okay.
So mean. Oh my
So,
God.
like, cows can't lay down. They can't get back up if you do that. It's very, very mean. I have never participated, but it is a thing.
Oh my God, no.
What was that? I mean, that's just wrong.
Well, I mean, even more so than that, the fact that, like, these two dudes took these girls on a date to go cow tipping is a whole other level.
Is that realistic? Like, is that something that happened in your town, Megan?
No, we went to Walmart.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, we went to Walmart in my town too. So okay, that was
drunk guys did cow tipping. Dates were at Walmart.
Okay, that's a little bit better.
Yeah,
you had some classier men.
And the only other thing that I had down was there's a bit where JD is talking to Veronica, because Veronica says that, you know, oh, we got rid of one Heather, the next one pops up, and JD mentioned like a Hydra, and Veronica reacts as though she's never heard of a Hydra, and I refuse to believe that the character of Veronica doesn't know what a Hydra is, because that's exactly what something she would know.
I completely agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
She has like a whole bit, like after they have sex after playing croquet, which is enough in itself of a sentence to say that she should know what a Hydra is, that she seduced someone with croquet, that like she's talking about how she was supposed to like skip grades. Like she would absolutely know what a Hydra is.
Yeah, it's just like, that was, like, funnily enough, that was the thing that took me out of this film, was the fact that this character wouldn't know what a, you know, Greek mythology creature was. Like, bullshit. She knows what that is. But yeah, I'd say...
Well, I appreciate that somebody mansplaining Hydra to a girl is like the thing that you were like, no, not real.
Yeah.
All the suicide pacts and like faked murders and everything, and you were like, she would know what a Hydra is.
Yeah, like, it's just... Yeah, no. That was like the only part where I genuinely felt like... I don't know if the writer was trying to kind of make it a joke or something, or just make it a thing, but it was like that was the one bit of writing in this film that I thought fell flat. But yeah, so that's...
Well, can I ask a question?
No, absolutely not. How dare you ask? Carry on.
No. Well, like, I want to know what... Because, I mean, I know what my answer is. What disturbed you guys the most? Like, what scene, like, bothered you the most out of this movie?
Tell you what,
'Cause I
Janelle,
know,
why
like,
don't you go first with that one?
Yeah,
oh
go
my
for
God,
it.
like everything. No, just kidding. I mean, for me, I feel like there was a lot of like sexual assault scenes that like were just like, I mean, even just kind of JD and Veronica's like relationship sometimes, like he would just grab her and kiss her, and like a lot of like things made me really, really uncomfortable. But I think the biggest thing for me was just the scene where they're cow tipping and she's getting date raped in the background, and like no one's saying anything, like, and it's just happening, and Veronica's over talking to JD. I remember just being like sick to my stomach through that whole scene.
Yeah. Now, my response to the question what in this film disturbed me is genuinely nothing, because I have an incredibly morbid sense of humor, but also I've always been able to have this thing where I can look at this and just see it as like piece of art. This is something they did. Like I'm able to kind of look at it with that veneer. So I've never seen a horror film that has scared me. I've never watched a film that has disturbed me either. Like that, it's weird. Like there are several things in this that's like, oh, that would be horrific. Like that would be the dregs of humanity right there if that was going on. But yeah, no, I was able to watch this film entirely just looking at it, just like, oh, okay, what's next? Like I don't know what that said about me as a person, but.
We are just two opposite sides of the spectrum. That's all it is. Like, pretty fully much. Opposite. I wish I was more like that, where I could take the emotion kind of out and just watch it from, like, an outside perspective. That must be, like, a very healthy way to watch movies.
It's a healthy way to watch films, however, it's not the... You know, it can lead to issues if that's how you live your life.
I mean, there's pros and cons to everything, right?
True. Yeah. Yeah, you could say the grass is always green on the other side. Oh, look, something we mentioned earlier. Well, go on then, Megan. What's your answer to this then?
I don't know why this really is, but I just like, even like, and I'll be honest, watching it this time, it was even more date rapey than I remember. I didn't remember how much he would just like grab her and kiss her. And maybe that was because like my teenage brain was like, ooh, boys in trench coats. But like it just like it didn't like register with me. The cow tipping date rape scene always got me. But my thing with it was always that like every single one of those moments I could tell like, oh, the point is that like the film wants you to be upset about this. But like for some reason the thing that always got to me is the scenes with JD and his dad. Where they do that thing where, like, the dad will call him son and he'll talk to the dad like he's the son. Or, like, wait, hold on. The dad will call him the dad. Like, the dad would come in and he'd be like, oh, Dad, can I have a friend over? Whenever he sees Veronica on the couch. And then JD will be like, oh, sport, yeah, you're supposed to ask permission for that. And there was something about that, like, role reversal, like, just because it was never really addressed, that always, like, kind of, like, set my hair on end. Like, there was always something, like, so, there was, because it was, like, everything else in the movie, I felt like, oh, this is making an impact because it's supposed to. But for some reason, the scenes with him and his dad always really just kind of like were very chilling to me, just because it's like I felt like I never got the reward of like, yeah, like I'm supposed to not like this. And it's like whenever like you find out that JD's mom committed suicide by going into one of the buildings that the dad was blowing up, and like JD brings that up, and then it's like the dad completely drops the routine, is just like, yep. And it just, there was something about it, like, just because it didn't feel like there was a resolution to it, that really just always gets me every time I watch it.
I will say, thinking about it now, I don't know if this is devil's advocating it or trying to read into it too much, but if you take what you were just saying, so obviously the dialogue there between JD and his dad, it's a role reversal. If you were to take their dialogue and literally just switch characters so they were more regular, that would be as if someone were writing the cheesy over-the-top dialogue of just like, yeah, hey, sport, aren't you supposed to ask permission? Oh, sorry, Dad. I was like, it's that. And I feel that flipping it to the other characters is really just taking an extra level of, we know this dialogue is cheesy, let's see what we can do with it.
No, like whenever he's like working on the bomb that he's gonna blow up the school with, it's like he's got the door shut and the dad's like yelling through the door like, hey Dad, can you come help me with my homework and everything? And JD's just like, sorry, sport, I'm a little busy right now. Or there's something about, because like I said, it's like everything else, because like the movie does such a good job of like, everything's a punchline, so you understand, like, oh, this is supposed to be wrong. But for some reason, it was like the interactions with, like, JD and his dad, like, it never feels like you get that punchline. So it always just, like, made me feel really weird about it.
Yeah.
And like I said, I can't even, like, quite, like, articulate it. But, like, yeah, it's like that cheesy, like, Hallmark movie type dialogue, but something about having it flipped just like increases the insincerity level like up to a point where like it's not funny. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's like a really good acting kind of exercise or lesson, I guess, where it's like, I mean, the dialogue is very important, and screenwriters have a lot of respect for them. I don't want to, say this and have that be discounted. But at the same time, the different actors could take that dialogue, even with the same characters, and do it completely differently. But the way that they played off of each other, I think that's what made it. There was almost an aggression to it that normally wouldn't have existed there. That was just, I think, the actor listening and responding, and, that building upon the energy of the last line, that I think is what made that so interesting.
No, I think that makes, because it's like I said, like there's so much in the movie, like they're being so callous about so many things, and I feel like you always kind of get that punchline where you're like, oh yeah, you're the bad person, I'm not supposed to agree with you. But there was just always something about this like very subtleness with them that it was like I felt like you never actually got the resolution of like, oh yeah, like we can all agree this is bad. Like, you know what, I don't know. It was very, very strange, but like it always, like it's the worst part of the movie for me, just because like I feel like I never get the satisfaction of like the film telling me like, oh yeah, no, it's okay that you don't like this.
Yeah, and like just with us talking about it now, I just kind of had a bit of a weird flash as well, because the way the characters are talking to each other, it kind of gave me a bit of a weird like film connection type thing here, which would be, I sort of have a headcanon now that he actually had a brother that you never saw who changed his last name and grew up to become Jason Bateman. Because they feel very similar, like in that fake sincerity of playing everything. Like,
well, I think that there's something, the thing that really bothers me about like JD's character is like I'm not trying to sympathize with him necessarily, because I mean like he is literally the archetype of the bad boy, and he's like one of the first manic pixie dream boys that we've ever gotten in media, where it's like, no, like he's a sociopath, but he's also the only character that actually commits suicide in the whole thing. Like it's just like there's always like something about him where it's like he's the one that always feels the most lost, because he never really gets that ending of like figuring out that he was wrong.
now, here's something interesting as well that you mentioned that. Do you know what the original ending was going to be?
No.
So the original version of the script that they made, JD actually succeeds in blowing up the school, and the final scene is like a prom in heaven. But the people at the production company agreed to finance the film as long as they changed the ending. So this is the alternate ending that the studio wanted, as it were.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Well, and that's not like, I was like texting with Janelle like after she watched a film, like before we came on here. And it's like, it's one of those things where like, I think that JD is a very important character in this, just because I think that he symbolizes like the bad boy that girls fantasize about. Like, he's the James Dean, or in modern terms, he's every John Green character that like, my little sister is attracted to. Like, he's like that bad boy archetype that you really need to stay away from. And I feel like this movie does a really good job of like really like solidifying like, no, he's a bad guy, like he's a murderer and kind of a rapist and also like a whole bunch of other really terrible things. But like there's something that still makes me feel for him in a way that like every other character in this gets the chance to sort of, I guess, like realize their faults or make a change or something like that, where like he's the only character that doesn't really get that opportunity. Like he's literally just the villain. And maybe that's like, like late 80s, early 90s writing, but there's always something like so unsatisfying for me about his character that like I never feel like he actually got the chance to like be better.
Yeah.
I mean, I would argue though that he did have that opportunity. Like, I feel like Veronica was his opportunity. Like, Veronica asking him like to not kill people. Like, that was his opportunity.
No, which is a reasonable ask.
Like, I don't know. I truly despised him, like, with every... This is, like, as soon as I ended watching the movie, I texted Megan, I was like, I hate this character so much. So I don't have any sympathy for him at all. At all. And I don't have any sympathy, I feel like, for that mindset of, like, woe is me, life is hard, so I'm gonna take it out on everybody else. So I think that's also why he... I just did not understand Veronica's attraction to him. I was like, why don't you just get away from this man? Like, I was just very, very frustrated for poor Veronica the whole time.
Well, she leaves it pretty early on though, too.
But she keeps
like I don't know
going
what like
back.
the timestamp is, but well, I mean like she keeps going back because he's trying to like murder more people. Like I feel like the romantic part of their relationship ends pretty early. But I feel like this is coming off like I'm like a JD sympathizer and I'm not. like I very much think that like this movie was like proof that like he's the kind of guy that we all need to stay away from. Like he's a clove cigarette as a person and we're not supposed to like him. But like I don't know, like I always like I feel like that ending, like just the fact that he's the only one that actually does it is always like so weird to me just because it's like I feel like everybody else learns a lesson and he just is gone.
Yeah, and Megan, yes, I had to stop lying to you. This is an intervention. We're all worried about you and we really want you to get some help.
I know, it's my bad boy tendencies, I get it.
We're keeping you away from boys in trench coats from now on.
From now on, only men in petticoats. That's all you're allowed. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Oh, you found my other fetish. Great.
And upgrade somewhat.
Okay, fine. Men in no clothes. No, wait, that's worse.
Oh, man. You're reading me like a book.
I think I've pretty much got everything I had on this film. Is there anything else that you really wanted to bring up about the film Heathers?
I mean, I don't want to, like, belabor the JD and Veronica thing, but I do want to ask both of you, why do you think Veronica is so attracted to JD and kept going back to him? Like, what I wrote down, I literally wrote down, like, I'm trying to figure out what Veronica's weakness is, because she has agency. In the beginning of the film, like, she tells off the Heathers. Like, I really liked about her character, she wasn't the typical nerdy girl who was like being remade by the popular girl. Like she stuck up for herself. Like she gave, back talk and things like that to the quote unquote popular girls. But then when it came to JD, she wasn't able to. So to me, that was like a really huge disconnect of like, well, why is she weak in some moments and like strong in others? Is it just like teenage love? Is it just attraction? Which, I mean, I don't know if that's simplifying it, but that was kind of my question, I guess.
Well, I would say, based on my single watch of this film, I would say I felt the initial attraction that was there, aside from the fact that, he's Christian Slater and he's obviously going to be the main love interest, is the fact that out of everyone at the school, he's the only one that isn't also in some sort of clique or cliche or other group. Because, you've got all the jocks, you've got all the nerds, you've got all of the cheerleaders, you've got all of this, you've got all of that. And he's an island in and of himself. And that's what she wanted. She wanted something that was different from the status quo. Now, I can't read any more into that because I didn't grow up in an American high school. I didn't have that kind of experience, so I don't know if there's something else I'm missing that might have also fed into it. But that's kind of my surface level take on it.
No, I think that that's completely right. I mean, I think that that's where a lot of the initial attraction to him comes from, is that he's an outsider to the school. Like, you know, I mean, if you think about it in terms of like an American school, like everybody that she has gone to school with, she has gone to school with since she is a child, like grade school. Like, it's in Ohio. Like, she has known these people since she was in, like, kindergarten, basically. And so I think that the initial attraction really comes from the fact that he's the first person that sees her as just who she is, rather than having grown up with her and grown up with her falling into different cliques and, like, things like that. Like, I think that his outsider perspective is very attractive because he actually sees her the way that she wants to be seen, not the way that everybody has been placing her. But the only other thing that I'll say to that is she leaves him right after they kill Kurt and Ram, the football players, which is in the middle of the movie. Like, she's only really with him for half the movie. And after Kurt and Ram, like, she goes over to his house, and he's like, it's like there's like the scene where like he takes out like it, like she's at it in his living room, and he takes out the gun and he like shoots a like vase and like blows up a vase, and he's like spouting off all of his stuff, and she's like, no, we're over. And all of their interactions after that are only because she's trying to keep him from doing anything else. So, like, I don't really think that the romance really carries through the whole thing. I think that there's a level at the end, like in the whole boiler room scene, whenever she's trying to keep him from blowing up the school, where, like, she does try to reason with him. But I think that that falls more into, like, she's trying to fix a broken person, not she's still in love with him. Like, I don't know. I just, like, I never really read it as, like, their romance really carried on past killing the football players. Like, I think the minute he tricked her into shooting someone, she was like, oh, no, we're done.
But they have the whole moment in the car after that. Like, they have multiple moments after she's, like, she full on gets manipulated by him. He full on lies to her, and then she continues to, like, be in the car with him, have a conversation with him, like, hear him out, and then is over his house as if they're continuing their relationship. So, like, it's not until he shoots the TV, I think, that she starts to distance herself. And then I don't think
That's
it's really
fair.
until... honestly, I would argue the relationship doesn't really end until he goes to her parents' house and gives them that note, kind of like that she's gonna, like, fake her suicide or whatever. I don't think it's not until that point where she's like, okay, he needs to be stopped, kind of.
Well, I guess, like, to that, I would just say, like, they're supposed to be, like, 17.
Fine.
And so I just, like, I feel like there's a level of, like, that's not rational, but, like, what 17-year-old is.
No, that's fair.
So, like, I feel like there's a level of... I feel like there's a level of, like... Well, and, too, I mean, like, she's complicit in a murder. So, I mean, like, I feel like I feel like if you're young and somebody tricks you into shooting someone, your first thought wouldn't be to go straight to the cops and rat them out, because you would go down with them. Because, I mean, like, she has been complicit in all of these murders up until now. So, I think that, like, I think that there's a level of, like, her just not thinking things through because she's a teenager. And I think there's a level of her being confused. Like, one of my favorite lines in the movie is, like, whenever she's, like, writing in the diary. And she was like, we tried things JD's way and nothing changed. And we tried things Miss Pauline's way, which is the, like, more hippy-dippy feelings teacher, and nothing changed. So now I don't know what to do. Like, I think that it's a lot less, like... oh, she's the main character and she's making bad decisions, and a lot more, why is the 17-year-old the one who's supposed to solve all these problems? Like, why aren't the adults dealing with this? Like, why is our hero a 17-year-old girl?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a fair point. And I could definitely see how, like...
I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate. Like, I totally agree with you. Like, poor choices all around.
Just poor choices. But, like,
But
teenagers
just to,
make
just
poor
to
choices.
play devil's advocate, like, also, she's 17, and this is, like, adult problems. Like,
No.
she shouldn't be... Like, she shouldn't have to deal with any of this.
No, that's fair. I mean, I think my biggest thing is, like, sometimes she has agency and sticks up for herself, and other times she doesn't. And that's what was frustrating for me, is it just seems like a little inconsistent. But, I mean, to your argument, yeah, teenagers are inconsistent. Sometimes you have confidence, sometimes you don't. And I'm sure love and, teenage love skews all of that. So I could definitely see both sides.
Well, and if you're looking at this as like a subversion of a John Hughes movie where stalking's fine, date rape's fine, like negging is fine, like I think that I think that if this movie came out like now in 2020, like you could have less sympathy for her still going after him, but I mean this was coming off the era of like boys learning that it's okay to stalk a girl because she just doesn't know that she loves you yet, and that's romance. So like I feel like part of that too is like the lesson. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm being too generous.
And also, like, thinking about, like, a lot of these films from back then, when people say, oh, this film was made now, like, a lot of the old films, you say, this film would never get made now. Like, I'm trying to think about it, like, thinking through everything in the film, and I actually think if this film had never been made, but this script landed in studios now, I think this film would get made the same way now. Like, I think there's enough in it that, for instance, everyone that does any of the shitty stuff gets their comeuppance. All of the people that are either, attempting to date rape or, insulting or picking on people and all of that stuff, like, they all get killed. Like, it's almost like a horror film, actually, in that kind of respect. Like, kind of feels like Nightmare on Elm Street type thing, where all of these characters are just dying left, right, and center. I would be, what? Okay, final thing before we wrap this all up, because some of us have got to get to bed at this point. But let's say this film was made now. Who would you guys cast as Veronica and JD?
Ooh. I mean, there's this on Riverdale. There's either Cody or Dylan Sprouse. I don't know which one it is. He plays a character very similar to JD. I would cast him as JD, definitely. Okay. Veronica, let me think.
I would cast all my ex-boyfriends as JD, clearly.
Oh yeah, was that not an option?
I'm like trying to think. I feel like Veronica is the harder one for this.
Yeah.
I would agree with that for JD, or I would give it to I think Ansel Elgort. Mm-hmm. Like, I think he's the modern JD. Like, I think like his character in The Fault in Our Stars, his character in Baby Driver, like that's JD now. Mm-hmm. Like, if we're modernizing it, like I would say Ansel Elgort, but for Veronica,
I actually have an idea for who I would put as Veronica, although she's still a couple of years younger than the character's supposed to be. But I would pick Millie Bobby Brown.
Oh, that's a good choice.
Ooh, I could see that.
That's a really good choice.
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't have a pick for JD. I don't know enough actors around that age that I think would fit the mold. I mean, hell, if I'm picking from Stranger Things, trying to think, like Will's older brother, can't think of his damn name now, but
I know who you're talking about.
Oh no, he would be perfect.
Yeah, he would be really good.
He would be perfect.
That's a good one.
See, I think that I would pitch like Kiernan Shipka for Veronica, maybe. The girl who played Sally Draper in Mad Men.
Oh yeah, she's Sabrina now.
She's like Sabrina now. Mm-hmm. I feel like maybe her, but even then, like, I think you might have nailed it, actually.
Yeah, I like yours the best, to be honest.
All right.
Okay, so you're in charge of the remake. You casted it.
Yeah,
Okay.
seriously.
Hell, if anyone manages to put that together, I will happily take the helm on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just let me be one of the Heathers. That's all I ask if you're casting.
No, tell you what, you could be. Let's see, trying to think. Maybe you could be a cool aunt or something, and you'll just be a character that just comes in and just has something like that.
That sounds very fun.
And I would be one of the football players since I'm 6 foot tall and like super buff. You've never met me, so you don't know otherwise.
Yeah, to those listening to this, Megan is 6 feet and super buff.
I'm built like a Hemsworth. Okay, I'm like 5'3" and slight, but
You know what? This will only go over well for English listeners. However, I think we could cast you two as a pantomime cow. So you guys should be the cow that gets tipped
we'll
over.
be the cows that get tipped.
Oh my god. There we go.
That is a role I would be so happy to play.
Absolutely.
And Megan and Janelle is the tipped cows.
Featuring, starring.
Yeah, you get the "and" credit at the in the opening. Okay, all right. Well, I think we've pretty much gone over this as much as we possibly can. So yes, all that's really left here is very much thank you guys both for coming on. It's been a blast talking to you guys about this. Where can people find you if they wish to do so?
Well, you can find me on all social media at Janelle Meghan.
And I'm at Hello Meghan Martin on Instagram, and that's the best place to follow me.
And also you guys are doing the Cause and Creation podcast. Do you want to give people a quick summary of what it's about?
Yeah, no, we co-host the Cause and Creation podcast. It is a podcast for creatives. We talk about our own creative lives, things that bring us inspiration and joy, and we also interview other creatives, and we've had some amazing guests, everything from film producers to game makers. So check us out.
Yeah, very much so. Go check them out. Go rate and review them, and us if you haven't done so. Hi, yes, wouldn't mind some of those. But yeah, seriously, go check them out. They're great. It's a lot of fun listening to that and just hearing them talking about, you know, the creative process and just making things, because hell, it's fun to make things. So yes, and for those of you that want to get a hold of us here at BlokeBusters, basically just look for BlokeBusters. It's kind of difficult to not find us if you just Google BlokeBusters, but you know, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, a little bit more sketchy on that side, but anyway, and got the website blokebusters.com. You can email us, theblokes@blokebusters.com as well, if you really want to go long form into everything that I said wrong on this podcast. But you know, I'll probably read it. You know, you never know. Give it a shot. But yes, once more, seriously, thank you guys for coming on. Janelle, always great to have you on. Megan, definitely hope we can have you back on for something else.
No, thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, I had a blast.
Yes, seriously, thank you guys. And I will be talking to everyone else later. Bye.
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 In case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Hang on a minute, lads. I've got a great idea.
Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.